my phone beeped because I went live. That threw me off. Welcome to your regular scheduled programming. Hail to the podcast, Sunday at 6, live where we like to be, covering Michigan's dominant win over Minnesota. We're halfway through the season already. Hard to believe, but a lot of the we'll see conversation. We've got a lot of evidence to talk about, whether there's some truth, still some concerns, and whether this version of the Michigan Wolverines is the best team in the country. We're going to get into that on this episode. I'm Trevor McCue, senior editor at Maize and Blue Review, joined as always, Intel insider, publisher, the man himself, Mr. Josh Henschke. Fly as always, nice salmon colored zip up today. How you doing?
Cold. It's cold. I had to turn my heat on for the first time.
Yep, I did last night too. I was like, why am I freezing? Oh yeah, it's October.
Yeah, I waited as long as I could, and then I was like, okay, I gotta do it.
Yeah,
gotta do it.
Actually, I just realized we're all wearing pink. Brock bringing the pink. I'm trying to give you shit, and I have a pink shirt on. How observant am I? There we go. Anyway, joining us, football season, the man on the road. We were together in Nebraska. He hit up Minneapolis this weekend, was in person for the Minnesota game. Brock Heilig, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. It was a good time in Minnesota yesterday, and we had field access, so it was cool to walk around on the field pre-game and post-game and take it all in, get to see some of the action up close and personal, and it was a good time.
See, you made a mistake, but it worked out for you. I told you should stay for an extra day. You could have gone to the Vikings-Chiefs game today, and then you might have been able to see Taylor Swift, but she did not show up at the game today, so you were bailed out for your terrible decision in returning home, but that's okay.
I was thinking about it. I was thinking she might be in Minnesota, but I guess she wasn't, so.
Yeah, she's good with New York, but she's not coming into Minnesota. That's not awesome. All right. So, yeah, like I said, we talked about arguably Michigan's most dominant, complete win of the season last week against Nebraska. I think this one probably surpassed it. Another dominating win for the Michigan Wolverines over the Minnesota Gophers. Head coach of Minnesota, PJ Fleck, said it's the best team he's seen in his time as a head coach of college football. So the question is obvious. I know the polls came out today. Georgia's still number one after their dominating win over Kentucky. Might have been interesting if that game was close. But polls aside, Josh, is Michigan the best team in the country?
No. They're one of the best teams in the country, but they're not the best team in the country right now. Georgia is still Georgia despite their struggles, just like Michigan's had struggles of their own. Until Michigan, can beat the likes of Georgia, they're not going to be the best team in the country yet. Do I think they're equipped to beat Georgia? Yes, I think they can. I think they match up really well against Georgia, particularly this year. I think they do really well. But, I think to be at the big boy table, you got to beat the guys at the big boy table. It's, as I've kind of said all this time, it's fine to be at the table, but if you want to be at the head of the table, you gotta take the next steps. And, 2 back-to-back college football playoff appearances is a good start. In 6 games in, and they're playing probably the best football alongside Georgia in the country right now, but I just don't think they're top dog. But for some reason, Michigan kind of leapfrogs Georgia at some point during the year if they both win. These rankings don't mean anything right now, especially, halfway through the season. So a lot of football left to be played. A lot of stuff still to be figured out, but I mean, they're definitely in the conversation. I mean, it's Michigan, Georgia, and then there's a pretty large gulf between the rest of the teams.
It's been a couple weeks, but it's good to have Josh's patented. Great question, Trevor. It doesn't matter. So, yeah, obviously, I mean, Michigan season's going to be determined still in a few weeks. They got to play Penn State, then Maryland, and then Ohio State. And then obviously, like Josh said, getting to the college football playoff. But Brock, you've seen this team in person every week this year, I believe, right? So I know you haven't been able to watch as much other college football as maybe in years past, but to your eyes, with the evidence you've been presented, I know we've got a wide open field this year, which is great for college football. I love that we're not talking about 3 or 4 teams. Like there's almost a dozen teams potentially, but to your eyes, is this the best team in the nation?
I wouldn't go there yet. I think Josh was pretty accurate in stating that, Georgia has earned that number one ranking, and I say until they lose, then there's no reason they should fall. Yeah, they played a close game against Auburn 2 weeks ago, but I still don't think that's enough to knock them off that top spot. And until they lose, I don't see Michigan really jumping them for that number one spot. But I would agree with Josh in the sense that I'd probably put Michigan in there with Georgia as the top two, and then I thought maybe Texas might be near that category as well, but then, like we saw yesterday, Texas lost to Oklahoma. So
That was a great game.
It was a really good game. So yeah, lots of parity in college football, but I do feel like there is a somewhat clear top two right now in Michigan and Georgia. I wouldn't say Michigan's the best team in college football, although I do think there's an argument that could be made that they are one of the best teams just because the way that they've dominated every opponent so far. And Georgia played a close game against Auburn and only won by a touchdown. They were tied late in the fourth quarter. So I do think there's an argument to be made that Michigan could be the best team, and obviously 11 AP poll voters think they are, but I personally wouldn't go there yet until Georgia loses.
So I am going to go there and say I do think Michigan is the best team in the nation right now. I am a big fan of Bill Connolly at ESPN and the S&P Plus rankings that he does. This is where things sit after week 6. I'm not surprised to see Michigan and Georgia kind of in their own tier right now. Again, results on the field are what going to matter, right? So Ohio State's obviously still going to be there. Oregon's still going to be there. Washington, both of the names that are on there. What's interesting about the S&P Plus and sometimes frustrating for people is you see this exact scenario where Texas is still at number 3 and Oklahoma's at 8 despite the win, right? So this is factoring in all the analytical stuff, right? And it takes into account strength of schedule, because that's the biggest thing in Michigan. You just keep hearing, well, they haven't played anybody. Absolutely true. We have metrics that can adjust for that, though, right? And we know every single week is a different story, and you can't do transitive property in college football. We just saw a Georgia Tech team beat Miami with possibly the most boneheaded decision I've ever seen by a head. I still can't believe it.
I love that. That was awesome.
Yeah, we could talk about that for a while, but Georgia Tech beat Miami, but lost to Bowling Green, and then Miami, Ohio beat them, and Miami stomped them, right? So you can get kind of weird. So when you look at the data, Michigan's offense is 8th in the nation in S&P Plus. Again, we've talked a lot about them being efficient, maybe not explosive. We saw a lot of that last night again. Their defense comes in at 2nd. I'd have to scroll down and figure out. I'm surprised it's not 1st, honestly, with the rankings. I have to scroll and see. But you can see with the total rating there, Michigan, Georgia, and then you get a pretty clumped tier there of Texas through USC. I just think from a complete standpoint, I'm with you. Georgia's the top dog till they're not. I think it's a very different team this year than what they had last year. That kind of puts Michigan in a unique situation where they're a very similar team. A lot of guys came back. They didn't have an offensive coordinator change in the same way Georgia did. Whole new system, new quarterback, whatever. But I'm comfortable putting them right there now, saying that I think they're the best team. But obviously they have to play 2 teams that are listed right there, Penn State and Ohio State. So moving forward into the season, we'll talk more about Minnesota, the actual game, in a second here, but what game do you think maybe concerns you the most right now, Josh, going forward? Is it Penn State? Maryland looked really good against Ohio State for a little bit. Ryan Day did his patented run up the score at the end, so hopefully nobody noticed. And then obviously the Buckeyes at the end of the year.
Yeah, I mean, Penn State is very much the same way too. That they're a run it up at the end of the game type of team to make it look better than what it did. They've had a couple of those games this year too. I thought Maryland would be a little concerning, but the way Ohio State kind of cruised towards the end there, they're not really a concern at all.
They still make too many mistakes.
Yeah, they're I mean, I don't know what the fix is, but they have a lot of boneheaded mistakes.
Not hiring Josh Gaddis, probably.
Well, yeah, that too.
I wasn't going to say it. I couldn't help myself.
I mean, as far as my concern level for the rest of the way, I guess Penn State, because you're playing at Penn State, but I don't know. I mean, I look to see who their head coach is, and it's James Franklin, and it's just like that doesn't move the needle for me in my concern meter. I think Penn State is a good team. I just think Michigan is better. There'll probably be a day where Penn State beats Michigan at home, but I just don't think that day is going to come in November this year. And Ohio State, again, hasn't shown me anything that makes me think, wow, this team is better than they were last year. They're arguably worse. A lot of areas that look really bad. So I guess if I was forced to answer out of the two, I would say probably Penn State's probably the more complete team and probably the only team in the Big Ten outside of Michigan that can really give Ohio State some real problems. Maryland did for a little bit, but again, they just revert back to normal Maryland where they just make dumb mistakes and throw the game away. So I think Penn State probably will be my answer, but they're very much like Ohio State where, they'll struggle, but, they'll add, 14 to 20 points on at the end of the game where it doesn't matter to make the score look a little better. But nothing they really do kind of concerns me right now. I mean, yeah, they have talent, but I just think Michigan's more talented and they play better football.
Brock, real quick, just because I know you follow the AP poll really closely. I got a kick out of this as well with Texas losing and the way the first place votes dispersed. And I don't remember the writer's name, but there's one guy who had Michigan at number 3 2 weeks ago. And then since they beat Nebraska in a dominating fashion and beat Minnesota in a dominating fashion, now has them at 7. So the AP poll is what it is, right? But
I saw that. I'm pretty sure it was a Nevada writer, some guy who covers Nevada football, and he had Michigan at 7. I didn't pay that close attention to see that he had them at 3 a few weeks ago, but I did see Michigan had won 7th place vote, which I honestly think is kind of bizarre. I don't know how you could watch this team and think that they're any worse than 3rd or 4th best team in the country, but each voter has a vote and they can do whatever they want. But I will say that going back to a little bit to what Georgia, I had one more point to add on there before we move on. I will say I think this year's Michigan team is much better than the 2021 Michigan team, and this year's Georgia team is much worse. Maybe not much worse, but they are worse than the 2021 Georgia team. So because of that,
I almost hate using the word worse because that was arguably one of the best teams. I mean, defenses for sure ever.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So but it's taking a step down for sure.
Yeah. And so I feel like if the two were to meet in the playoff in the first round or in the national championship, I will confidently say that game would be much closer than it was 2 years ago. And something that I think Michigan has an advantage for in that hypothetical matchup would be that it's personal for Michigan. Like there were a lot of players on that. There still are a lot of players on this year's team that
what a great point.
Yeah. And suffered that, blowout basically. And Georgia doesn't really have that personal vendetta against them, So I feel like if that were to happen, Michigan would have, a considerably better chance than they did 2 years ago.
I haven't really thought about that. That's a good point that we keep talking about. This feels like year 3 almost of a window, right? Like that this team kind of enough components have stuck around through all of it that it feels like a continuation almost. So it's kind of an interesting point. For me, real quick, before again we start diving into some of the Minnesota stuff. Right now, I'm with you, Josh. I think it's the Penn State game that concerns me a little bit more, only because, and this isn't a shot at Ohio State. I think they probably get more flack than they deserve. You lose to Michigan 2 years in a row after the dominating couple decades you had, right? But I mean, it's a very, very, very good football team, right? We've been envious of what Ohio State has done for a long time. So, but I just look at how you've lost the last 2 years, right? How do you compare now? And heading into the season, our concerns or things we thought might be an issue for Ohio State, where you're obviously going from the number 2 pick, who probably should have been the number 1 pick, it's looking like in the NFL draft, CJ Stroud. You're going from him to Kyle McCord, which no shot at him. It's hard to replace CJ Stroud, and you're trading experience for new, whatever. Some concerns on the offensive line, right? We know Ohio State wants to learn to run the ball and be able to run the ball to win a game. We've seen Ryan Day trying to force that. He did it in the Maryland game because whoever runs the ball in Michigan, Ohio State wins the game. So it's clear he's trying to drive that, right? And then we wondered with the defense, is it going to get better or was it going to be more giving up big plays kind of thing? So I think on the defensive side, they might look a little better. I think the defense might be better, but we've seen some of those O-line concerns come to fruition with Ohio State, and they are struggling to run the ball. And then, they just go back to doing them and chucking balls to their top receivers. And McCord feels like he's struggling, and he finishes with 300 yards and 3 touchdowns and whatever. So just from a matchup standpoint, I feel good about Michigan. And I've said it all along. I think Penn State reminds me so much of 2021 Michigan. And I wonder if they're going to be kind of equal. It's in, Happy Valley, but then, I'm with you too. James Franklin. It's just, he always finds a way to do something silly to throw a game away. But anyway, like I said, let's get back to Minnesota. JJ continues to make Bowling Green look like an anomaly. Another really good game for him. 14 of 23 drops in this one. A little uncharacteristic. The receivers have been pretty money this year, but he got over 200 yards, got into the end zone a couple times with rushing touchdowns. Josh, I know we've already talked about, I know we've already talked about JJ Heisman candidate potential, whatever it might be, but you brought up something on our show we did last night that I thought was interesting, talking about the system of this offense and how JJ fits that. And he's not a system quarterback. That wasn't what you were saying, but I think it's a really interesting point. I think a lot of the good things we saw in this offense in 21 and 22, we talked about in the KJJ debate, JJ being able to bring it to the next level. We're seeing that next level now.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I mean, JJ is the perfect quarterback for what Michigan wants to do offensively. They're not the air raid offense that's going to put up 400 yards a game passing. I mean, I think they could very well do that if they were put in a position where they had to throw the ball. But, you get Michigan out of sorts, then that's when you're going to have to take advantage of what they're like offensively. But yeah, I mean, JJ McCarthy is the perfect quarterback and person for what you want to run that system.
And person, great point.
Yeah, he's got, he takes that offense to a whole new level. If they're allowing him to freely use his legs more now, now defenders kind of have to account for his legs on top of, okay, are they going to run the ball? Blake Corum's out there now. Even you have to worry about Kalal Mullings out there. Are they going to run the ball? Okay, now JJ takes is faked the run. Now he's got the ball. Is he going to run it or is he going to throw it to a guy that's open downfield? It kind of opens so many wrinkles of this offense that really Michigan hasn't had in a very, very long time. And I think, arguably ever, if you want to talk about the mobility standpoint too. I think obviously, Denard Robinson is very,
but paired with the passing ability.
Right. Yeah. I'm talking about the whole package. I think he had more of a half of the package. He had the running part down and was very effective runner, but if you needed to get a pass and he could do it, but there's something to be said about JJ's consistency throwing the ball. He's accurate. He would have had 3 incompletions if you count the 3 drops. I mean, I think he was 14 for 20 last night or something like that. Yeah, 17 for 20 if you count those drops as catches. Another hugely efficient game. So, he rarely makes mistakes. Even running the ball, he rarely makes mistakes. So you've got that. Someone who can take care of the ball, someone who makes good decisions, and someone that can also be creative and a staff that allows him to be creative, that really takes Michigan's offense to the next level. And again, they don't need to put up 500 yards of passing or whatever a game to do what they're doing right now. And that's kind of, domination on both sides of the ball. I just think that, this team is going to go as far as JJ takes them. And, the more leash that this staff gives JJ, I think the higher the potential of what this offense would be moving forward.
Yeah. I totally agree. I feel like I hate to keep bringing up the Cade stuff because that's in the past, but I feel like for those who watched the game yesterday, there were a few plays that stood out where it was just clear as day that JJ is the guy. And I think the two scrambles, especially the two rushing touchdowns that he had, those are just JJ being an athlete, right? That's him going out there and making a play and getting to the pylon on both of those. And that third one, the deep ball, the one he threw to Cornelius Johnson was a great throw and maybe a little bit underthrown actually, or a little bit behind Cornelius, but still a pretty solid throw and to have the arm strength to get it to him. That was a ball that traveled. I'd have to go back and look, but I'd guess 50 yards in the air at least, right? So, I mean, he's just the guy. He's going to take Michigan as far as he can. He's going to put the team on his back if he has to, but I don't think he will because Michigan's got so much talent around him. But he's looking really, really good. And Trevor, like you said, the Bowling Green game continues to look more and more like an anomaly. And he's just and it's weird. He's not, like Josh said, he's not going out there and throwing for 400 yards and lighting up the stat sheet. Yesterday, he was an efficient 14 of 20 for yards in the low 200s, maybe. What was he, 220?
Yeah, something like that. I don't have it in front of me.
It was something like that. Yeah.
And he had the one touchdown to Colson Loveland. So it's not like he's going out there and throwing for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns as Michigan wins 52-10. But I mean, he's doing a great job of playing efficient football and making plays when he has to, but also letting the guys around him make the plays that they need to. And this is something that I tweeted out yesterday during the game, is that Blake Corum had 9 touches in the game yesterday and Donovan Edwards had 8. And so for Michigan to win these games by 7 touchdowns, or I guess it'd be 6 touchdowns, and 2 of your better players are getting a combined 17 touches, and McCarthy's not even having this spectacular game. It just goes to show how well-rounded Michigan is in really every way.
I think the thing that's interesting to me is the perception versus a little bit of reality. Like, we're talking about him not being crazy explosive, right? But in the Big Ten, we all know his accuracy, 77.6%. He's 13 points ahead of Drew Aller in the Big Ten, right? But for a guy that doesn't play in the fourth quarter, except for a couple snaps against Rutgers, thanks, Brock. Yeah. Yardage, 1,290. Little Tua's leading with 1,600. But the rest of the guys, McCord's got 1,375. That's not much more than JJ. And JJ's got 11 touchdowns, right? Second in the Big Ten. He leads the Big Ten in big time throws with 11. He only has 3 turnover worthy plays. He's got the highest passer grade in the Big Ten. So even in this somewhat conservative passing offense, he's not putting up Caleb Williams numbers. Right. But he's still putting up really good numbers that, again, when we talk about the national conversation, might limit. But yeah, JJ just lights out right now. That Bowling Green game might end up being a really good learning lesson, if you will, or like something nice to get out of the way, if you will, and for JJ in terms of moving forward in the season. But I think it's kind of interesting. Josh, you said this team will go as far as he goes, and how he manages the offense. We talked a lot this offseason. We're going to move to the running game here. We talked a lot this offseason about managing the running backs, keeping them healthy, things like that. And we talked about all the depth in the running back room and guys getting more carries and how they would do that. And you could make the argument JJ is what's actually helping them limit the carries for the running backs at this point, whether it's the way he's managing the offense or him running himself. But Blake Corum had, was it 9 carries? Yeah, only 9 carries yesterday. Significantly less than the 25 plus he got in every Big Ten game last year. But the 9 was enough for him to make an impact, right? He got almost 8 yards a carry. He had a touchdown. And then, Donovan only had 4 carries. And I think people still have some concerns, questions. We'll talk about that. But he ran the ball significantly better. Josh, you've talked about that, just the way it looked like he was running. 5 yards a carry, 4 yards after contact per attempt, really good. Some missed tackles. He had the highest elusive grade on the team. So they're kind of moving him into that role where he's going to run a few times, and then he led the team in receptions yesterday. Right. So I think they're leaning into that receiving weapon with him, but enough Blake Corum peppered in to make an impact. Donovan kind of carving out his role. And then, like you brought up, Kalel Mullings looking good as well. That 3-headed running back room in limited action is crazy good and efficient right now.
Yeah. I know a lot of people are kind of looking at Kalel Mullings as rushing numbers and his attempts, and some might make the assumption that is Kalel now running back number 2? No, I think you can make the argument that it's running back 2 by committee right now. I think it's either it's 1A 1B when it comes to Donovan Edwards and Kalel Mullings. I think both guys do things differently very well. So you've got let's say you got a 3rd and short situation, you can trot out Kalel Mullings there that can pick it up between the tackles. And if you wanted someone like Donovan to go out there and out wide, you want to pick up a 3rd and short that way, you've got him to trot that out there as well. So you've got 2 guys that do 2 very different things, where I don't think one has to be on top of the other on the depth chart in order to make that happen. Obviously Donovan is more of a wide receiver type of guy, but can also, break out some runs here as well. So again, it's whatever you need at that certain point. If you want to sit Blake for the short yardage and want to trot out a bigger back, there you've got a bigger back. And if you've got Donovan Edwards, who can also, that can also go out wide and pick up some yardage in a short yardage situation, you can also do that too. But I think what Jim Harbaugh said after the game to reporters last night was really important to when he was discussing the running backs. The amount of 50-yard runs or 50-yard touchdown runs that both Blake and Donovan had last year, he called them an anomaly, and I think that's true. You're not going to see every game a running back break off a 70-yard run or a 50-yard run for a touchdown. 20 to 25 is probably more of the explosive type, but the amount of big runs that both of those guys had last year, it is more of an anomaly. So, I know obviously once they do that, they set the expectation that, hey, this is what they're capable of. This is what we want them to do every time. But at the same time, if you've got a back like Donovan who's picking up 5 yards a carry, you're putting your offense into a really good situation ahead of the sticks. You've got, a 5-yard run on first down. Now you've got 2nd and short coming up because you've got a guy who can get 5 yards a clip. And that obviously credit to the offensive line for making that happen too. But I think part of the conversation about Donovan is, what's up with Donovan? Is he okay? I think he's fine. I mean, I think there might be a little bit of a concern level there, but at the same time, we kind of have to temper our expectations too, that not every time he's going to touch the ball is there's going to be some big runs. I think, the 4 to 5 yards a clip that both him and Blake are picking up on practically every run is really crucial to keep the Michigan offense ahead of schedule, or at least on schedule. So I just thought that what Harbaugh said last night was pretty poignant and a good it was a good example of not everything has to be this long 50-yard run for a touchdown. I mean, they'll get there. I mean, I'm sure they'll probably get 1 or 2 before the season's over. But at least it'd be nice to get Donovan to at least get 1 touchdown in the process. That was
rude.
He was robbed last night.
I couldn't believe they put Blake in.
I know. I
couldn't believe it.
I'm sitting there going, "What? Just let him finish it. It's 1 yard." I mean, he can dive over the pack like Blake did. But I digress. But yeah, I think what they're doing collectively is just fine. I mean, you're not going to see them. They're not going to be top of the nation in terms of rushing yardage, but they're right up there. Their numbers, the tackles for loss numbers from the offensive line, the sacks are near the top of the country too. So, this offense is flowing. It's hitting its stride at the right time, at the halfway point. I couldn't think of a better time for it to hit their stride. And I think you're seeing tangible growth from the entire team from week to week. And that's really all you want to see right now.
That was a strange drive because, Donovan had that run to the goal line, which in my opinion, after looking at the replay, looked like a touchdown. And then the very next play, Blake had a carry, and I thought that one looked even more like a touchdown than Donovan's run.
I tweeted out, I said the Michigan offense has reached a new level. They got 3 touchdowns in one drive.
Yeah. And I'm sitting there looking at the replay on the TV, and I'm like, am I missing something? Like what's going on? And I guess Harbaugh elected not to challenge, and obviously Blake punched it in on the third chance. But I think the coaching staff had a little bit of a decision to make, in the sense that they had to decide whether to give Donovan his first touchdown of the year, or to try and let Blake, kind of pile up the touchdowns and catch Mike Hart and Denard Robinson. But yeah, that was a strange drive, but I think Josh nailed pretty much everything in the terms of the running backs. I do think last year was a little bit of an overload in the sense of the long runs. I mean, just off the top of my head, Donovan and Blake each had 1 in the Penn State game, and Donovan had 2 in the Ohio State game, 1 in Purdue, 1 in TCU, and probably missing a whole bunch of others. But yeah, this year, I mean, it's definitely, that number's gone down, and maybe they'll get a few more. Corum had that 40-yarder yesterday. Obviously didn't go for a touchdown, but that was a solid run. And so it'll come. And that's something that Donovan Edwards talked a little bit about when he met with reporters earlier last week. He said, it's going to happen when it's going to happen. And if I'm not playing better by the time Ohio State and the Big Ten championship and playoff comes around, then maybe there'll be something to worry about. But he said everything's fine right now, and he's all good. So I think I would just say that the ascension of Kalel Mullings has really helped there too, just because since Donovan Edwards has kind of maybe taken a little bit of a step back, Mullings is there to kind of replace that workload a little bit, so they have another option.
And again, I think about roles. I know Michigan likes to not care which back is out there and say, like, we're not going to change our play calls, or we're not, we're going to rotate them and treat them the same. But I think it's also good to have guys that are good at different things and utilize that, right? And Mullings, you go back to his high school tape, he looked like he was going to be a really good running back. And obviously we talked about the fact that Wisconsin was recruiting him. And if Wisconsin wants you at running back, then that's a good seal of approval for me. But now that he's had time to practice only with the running backs, you can just tell his style, that the way he moves, his vision, everything. He looks really good out there. And I like that little role he's carved out for himself. Before I move to the offensive line, just again, what your perception might be versus reality. We've been talking about some of the stats, right? With Blake Corum, this is kind of unfair because, Minnesota's running back Darius Taylor unfortunately did not play. So he's only got 4 games in, but he's been leading the Big Ten in rushing with 532 yards. Second place, Blake Corum, 494. So he's right there, 6 yards a carry, leads the nation with 10 touchdowns, right? So again, maybe it's not the Heisman level campaign we saw last year, but this is with a lot less carries too. It's just, again, I think they found a nice way to, let's get enough Blake for him to do Blake things and make an impact, and kind of spreading that out through the offense. But
and that's something that's really going to bode well for Michigan toward the end of the year, as Ohio State and the Big Ten championship, hopefully, and the college football playoff comes around, is that Corum they're going to try and keep Corum as close to healthy as possible, which is something they didn't have last year. And I think if Michigan brings in a healthy Blake Corum, and along with all the other pieces, I do think they're going to be tough to beat toward the end of the year.
They're clearly building for that. This is what Jim Harbaugh's always done. He's kind of brought an NFL mentality to college, right? They say 1-0 in 1 week at a time, but they're trying to get better every week. They're adding new wrinkles every week. They know their season's determined at the end, and that's what they're building towards. And they want the best version of Michigan to play on the Saturday after Thanksgiving against Ohio State. And now, like Josh talked about at the start of the episode, they got to win a playoff game. And they know they got to be in the best position to do that. So they're taking risks in some ways by doing that, right? Sometimes a game sneaks up on you because maybe you're not going out there with your full capabilities. But I think Michigan's now finding a way to slowly build through the year, but still destroy teams along the way, right? So we mentioned it a couple times here. The offensive line, we saw, and we talked about this every week, that the starting 5, what to do at left tackle, right tackle. We saw Ladarius Henderson get the start at left last week with Miles Hinton a little dinged up. They still rotated quite a bit towards the end of that game. And this one, we saw the same starting five again. And this statistically, what was the best performance for the offensive line. So Ladarius Henderson was awesome, had the highest pass block grade. And Carson Barnhart was just behind Zinter in third. So my argument has always been, I think Carson Barnhart is a really, really good tackle. And I think he's really comfortable at right tackle. And I think Zach Zinter, who had the second highest pass block grade, is really comfortable with Carson Barnhart next to him. So only one pressure allowed by the offensive line yesterday. That was Trevor Keegan. Obviously, they did really well in the run game as well. When the backups came in, Hinton got a few snaps, I believe. Yep. But at this point, Josh, and we've talked about Michigan maybe wanting to rotate and blah, blah, blah. I think they have a starting five now. Just it feels like that to me. I mean, whether you want to call this a hybrid version of the Michigan method or whatever, it's week 6, and I think it's pretty clear what the best five is.
Yeah, no, the proof is in the pudding now. I think it's pretty clear who their starting five should be and probably will be going forward. I think Ladarius Henderson gives you your best chance to be successful, and Carson Barnhart looks way more comfortable on the right than he did the left. So
2 really good games.
Yeah. So you've got really 2 good bookends there, and I mean, there's no, again, it's like we've mentioned with Harbaugh, there's no coincidence that they're playing better with Harbaugh back. And there's no coincidence they're playing better with Ladarius Henderson out left and Carson out right. So I think you can still shuffle guys in and out when needed. Trente Jones is the 6th line in that tight end role, but you can also shuffle in Miles when you need to. But like Hassler 247 says here, barring injury, this is the starting five, and I 100% agree that this is the starting five that should be going forward. But the talent that they have waiting in the wings too, that probably deserve to get more playing time too, is really good. GL Hadi, Andrew Gentry, Percy's also played pretty good ball this year. Crippen was right there with Drake Nugent for the starting center job, and Nugent's been fantastic. So there's just, the talent is really bright there. And the funny thing is, the argument is they deserve even more playing time, which is crazy because these guys aren't even playing in the fourth quarter. It's just wild to think that how little in 6 games in the fourth quarter that this group has played. It's just insane. But again, just like the running backs, that bodes well for Michigan down the stretch because they have more tread on the tire. They aren't getting banged up, and you can keep that core intact. And I think that starting five that we've seen the past couple of weeks has got to be the five moving forward. And even I know obviously that Hinton is banged up, but he can come in as necessary. But yeah, I think Ladarius Henderson gives you your best chance to win, and I think it's pretty clear that the coaching staff have started to realize that as well.
Yeah, Hinton was listed as questionable on the availability report yesterday, and obviously he saw some snaps later in the game, but this does seem to be the starting five. Henderson met with the media after the game, and he said he feels really comfortable at tackle, and like some people may know, he played his true freshman year at Arizona State at left tackle, and then he made the transition over to left guard for, I think, a season or 2 after that. And now he's back at left tackle at Michigan, and he said he's really feeling comfortable. He feels like he's doing a good job, and the offensive line's clicking. I mean, there's not much to really complain about there. The JJ McCarthy's had a clean pocket basically every time he's dropped back this season, and especially with this new starting five, and the run game is clicking. 5 yards a carry maybe for the game yesterday, and they're just doing a really good job. And yeah, I mean, there's not much else to say. They're clicking on, they're firing on all cylinders.
Henderson still has moments. You can tell he hasn't played a full time at left tackle, but just footwork and his strength, and he's not massive at 6'4", which is crazy to talk about. But Michigan's got an entire class of 6'6", 6'8" guys coming in, but he has really good length in his arms. It was nice to see the backups come in some yesterday and also play well. We talked about that early in the year that the backups struggled a little bit. Jack Tuttle has really settled into his backup role. He looked good. And then something interesting, you brought up Jeff Percy, somebody I think that gets lost in the conversation a lot. Shouldn't. He started at left tackle last year, spot start, and did really well, which is an incredibly tough task to be asked of. But last week, I found it really interesting. Andrew Gentry played left tackle and Percy played right guard, which was kind of a swap of positions. Although Gentry initially as a recruit had projected out as tackle. But anyway, last night, Percy, when he came in, was again at right guard, and it was Trente Jones that got some run at left tackle with Hinton coming in at right. So just something kind of interesting if you're one of those people trying to already think ahead to next year and what that group might be. I think El Hadi is probably a lock at left guard, and I think Crippen's probably a lock at center. Those guys, again, probably start on nearly every other roster in college football, right? But I always start with offense just because, top, bottom, whatever, and it's kind of a bummer. I probably shouldn't because this defense has been unbelievable. You could argue statistically or however it's the best in the nation. We've talked about fans and some concerns and things that make them anxious. The topic of the week this week was the secondary, and Will Johnson says, here's a pick six, second play of the game.
Yeah.
There were still a couple plays where, Sainer still, and I hate blaming Sainer still. I think that's Keon Sabb 100% on that touchdown at the end of the first half. And he bounces back with a pick six of his own. Mason Graham, obviously a story of the night last night, Josh, as well, comes back and even with one hand grades out as Michigan's best defender. I know I'm throwing a lot at you, but it's exciting. I'm literally smiling. I love what this defense is doing.
Oh yeah. I mean, that sack that he had was just ridiculous.
He flew at the guy.
That was insane.
How are you that athletic at 310, dude? It's
God. I mean, a little color on that Minnesota touchdown. Harbaugh said that was a coaching issue, not a player issue. They weren't in the right defense at that point, and I don't think anyone was expecting them for that guy to throw a dart that he did. But a funny story too. I had someone in the stands message me and say that they ran that play about 20 times in pregame, that same throw on that same slant. Yeah. So there's definitely something that they wanted to play and something that they had on their sheet. So they called it and they ran it and it was successful. It was a good throw, good catch. But I mean, again, that's the one big play that Michigan usually gives up a game. They average about one big play, and that was it, right at the end of the second half. And then, third and fourth quarter comes around and just, they do what they always have done the past 2 years under Jesse Minter, just completely just shut down everything in the third quarter. Still haven't given up a point in the third quarter. I believe they're outscoring their opponents about, I think it was 68-0 right now. It might be in the 70s, but just incredible stuff. Just an all-timer staff on defense. I mean, the adjustments they make at halftime, what they see in the first two quarters, and then go in. You go in, go in at the half, and then come out and just be a completely different team and just shut everything down. Just wild. I mean, they've got guys coming in, developing at the right time. I mean, and you've got guys playing 2 whole quarters that allows them to play even more. Someone like a Cameron Brandt, who Harbaugh's talked about the last couple of weeks, who's coming on strong, a guy in a group that is loaded right now at defensive line. DJ Waller's coming on strong. Keon Sabb, obviously, we've already talked about with the pick six. There's so much good happening on defense that we kind of ignore the fact that, the starting defense is just so good and so reliable that we're talking about the second tier guys getting so much playing time and developing a lot faster than they would in a regular year, especially considering how many guys are probably going to be gone from this defense after this year. Only bodes well for the future. So Yeah, just fantastic stuff all around. I mean, this defense is elite. And if you were to say, you'd pose the question, is this defense the best in the country? I would say 100% yes, absolutely. That's what I would consider the best in the country. Not Michigan as a team yet, but the defense is elite. Yeah. And I think Jesse Minter is elite in his play calling, and Klink is elite with his development of the defensive backs. I don't think Mike Elston gets enough love for what he does from a developmental standpoint as well. Obviously, Mason Graham came in with a ton of talent, but I mean, in order to get these guys in the position, he's built Cam Good up into what he is. From a guy that was kind of
look at Josiah Stewart just from the start of this year, the subtle little changes that he's made.
Yep. Yeah, you bring in Josiah Stewart coming along, Cam Good going from a guy that was bouncing around a roster and kind of middling in the depth chart to being a guy that they can rely on.
Yeah.
Again, just fantastic work all around by the defensive staff. I mean, it's just this team is built and so deep, and I really agree with PJ Fleck. It's just this team is just so deep at literally every position. I mean, you could even make the argument that they're deep at quarterback, and hopefully they won't ever need to explore that depth at quarterback, but they're just from top to bottom. I mean, there's just so many guys that they can throw at you. I don't know how you prepare for that. I mean, I don't envy the opposition in terms of trying to game plan for Michigan, particularly if you're an offense trying to game plan for that defense, because you never know who's going to be out there. I mean, they could have a whole different starting five on the defensive line and be perfectly fine without a drop off. So, I can't speak highly enough of this defense, and I do truly think it's an elite defensive unit who's going to have a ton of pros on it. A lot like the '97 defense.
Michigan fans need to enjoy Jesse Minter while he's here, because I'd be completely and utterly shocked if he was around next year. And Trevor's shaking his head. He's too good. I mean, he's an elite defensive coordinator, and the third quarter adjustments, or the whole second half, but mainly the third quarter adjustments that he makes are incredible. And going back to that one play at the end of the first half, like Josh mentioned, Harbaugh said after the game they weren't in the right defense. But I mean, that was just, I had a pretty good angle from sitting in the press box. The throw was coming like right toward my direction, and it was just a perfect throw by Callie McManus, and a great catch by the receiver. His name is escaping me right now, but
nailed the QB.
Thomas, was his last name Thomas? I can't remember. Oh well, it's relevant at this point.
Yeah, a perfect throw, perfect catch, and I think the notion that Sainer still got beat badly on that play is a little overblown. I think
not at all.
He was maybe a step behind the receiver, and I personally I'd say it was a little more on Keon Sabb than it was on Sainer still. Even though, like Harbaugh said, they weren't in the right defense, I do think Keon Sabb could have turned his hips quicker and gotten over there to help Sainer still to break that one up. But if it's going to take a perfect throw by the quarterback and a perfect diving catch by receivers to beat Mike Sainer still on the outside in the end zone in order to score points on this Michigan defense, then credit to the offense, but it's not going to happen much because this defense is so deep and talented. And as Gentle Comedian says, if that pass is incomplete, Sainer still is applauded for good coverage. Yeah, I mean, he was right there. He was right on him, and it was just a great throw and a great diving catch. Good job, Daniel Jackson. That's who it was.
That's it.
And so, yeah, I mean, that was like Josh mentioned, the one big play that Michigan seems to give up every game, but then Michigan comes out in the third quarter and shuts them down. And look at Nick.
Whoa.
Yeah,
we have to completely stop midpoint here. Nick.
You guys don't have to do that.
Nick, this is totally unnecessary, but thank you very much for your donation. We'll all consider this donations, because this goes right back into the M&BR coffers to send Brock to do what he does and to keep people keep us going. So thank you very much.
I'm also anytime we get a good row of the boat, trash, I'm good for it.
Yeah, exactly. Somebody forgot to tell Fleck that you can row as fast as possible, but if someone punches holes in your boat, you're still going down hard. Two of them smash their boat to pieces. Go blue. Yes, that was a quite a torn dinghy. By the end of it, quit playing with your dinghy.
Oh, there it is.
Nick, that's a good point. And speaking of rowing the boat, I loved the celebration that Mason Graham had after his sack or tackle for loss or whatever it was. But yeah, Graham had a really, really good game. To think that as a true sophomore, he's as talented as he is. Trevor is losing it over there, but I'm going to keep talking about Mason Graham. He's as a true sophomore to be as good as he is. He's one of the better players on this team, and he's probably one of the better defensive linemen in the country. And to see what he's doing as a true sophomore, just absolutely destroying offensive lines and with one hand nonetheless. Just the praise he got from JJ McCarthy and Will Johnson and Jim Harbaugh and maybe Ladarius Henderson even too. I mean, it's unbelievable. They called him a dog, a freak. Jim Harbaugh said he was really dominant and had a great game and things like that. And so just not only just Graham, but the defense as a whole, it's crazy to see how good they are. And I don't know when there's going to be an offense that's going to be able to figure them out. I don't think it'll be Penn State, and I'm not even sure it'll be Ohio State. So we'll see how far they can take this dominance.
Yeah, again, Nick, thank you very much for that donation. That was very unnecessary, but very thankful for your support. So that was awesome. Thank you. And it allowed me to do a Tommy Boy reference, which
R.I.P. Chris.
Never a bad thing.
Yeah.
Never a bad thing.
Oh my God, that is.
I'm always told you don't play with your dinghy.
I gotta watch. You eat a lot of paint chips as a kid. Why?
Yeah, did not play with their dinghy last night. They
Brock was.
I'm not going there.
Brock was -7 when that movie came out.
Yeah, I have no idea what you guys are talking about.
Oh, Brock. Oh no.
Have you seen Tommy Boy?
No.
Oh, you got to see it.
Do you know who Chris Farley is?
I've heard the name, but
oh. Wow, it's totally, ladies and gentlemen, we have derailed this podcast in a major way. Brock he knows the name Chris Farley. Oh my!
I mean, in his defense, he literally died like 5 years before he was born. Too.
True. I mean, yeah. I mean, Brock.
I guess he's like Art Belushi at that point, right?
Yeah. That is true.
Wow. All right.
I don't know how you move on from there.
I know. What do you do here? It revived Rob Lowe's career, Brock. There's no Parks and Rec without Tommy Boy. Okay. That third quarter we talked about, 24-10 at the half. Maybe people are a little frustrated with that touchdown. Michigan defense comes out, punt, pick six, punt, outscores them 21-0, 136 yards for Michigan, 7 for Minnesota. And I think there was like one play that got him into positive late in the game there.
It's another great reference.
I'm trying so hard to not quote like the entire Tommy Boy movie at this point. Like that's how we communicated with him. Did Brock just lose his job?
Yeah, I might be in the doghouse after that one.
You got the pink slip live on YouTube.
I'm just you're not gonna lose your job. I'm just gonna look at you differently.
Of course not. We all love Brock here. Just need to add a little bit of culture into his life.
What did you do? Brock, it doesn't hurt here. Not so much here. Right here.
I'm gonna the first thing I do after this podcast, I'm gonna go watch that movie.
Deal. I will watch it with you. We'll text each other. We'll do like a shared. So next week we will have Brock's review of Tommy Boy and why Black Sheep was good, but just didn't reach the same level as Tommy Boy. But Farley and David Spade, one of the greatest pairings of all time. Anyway, so I don't even remember where I was going to go with this. Fat guy in a little coat. Yeah, so good. I could get a good look at a T-bone steak by putting my head up a butcher's ass. Wait, no. Wait. It's got to be your bull.
Yeah.
Get out. Okay.
Oh, man. All right. We got to center ourselves now. We got to get back into football talk.
So I didn't think Mason Graham would take a step back even with a club on his hand. But what? Again, highest graded defensive player in the game, 2 sacks, multiple pressures, tackles for loss, blah, blah, blah. The dude is just unreal. That trio, which we saw early in the first half, a little bit of an adjustment. Of course, later in the second half, we started seeing Michigan go to more of a 3-4 or a 5-2, however you want to classify the edge players in that situation. But Chris Jenkins, Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant with 2 edge players outside of them. Good luck, right? Again, Stewart with another great game. He's put 2 back-to-back here. He's doing a better job setting the edge. He's bull rushing, making just subtle little moves. McGregor, I think McGregor's had his 2 best games back-to-back as well. He's a guy that doesn't necessarily always show up in the stat sheet, but he's a factor on almost every play. Derek Moore is still a force. And we're not even talking about Jalen Harrell, who's arguably the best all-around edge player they have. The linebackers, again, Colson, Barrett, Houseman, quiet, which is a good thing, but they're not making big mistakes. And it's unreal how good that defensive group is in terms of players. And then, the coaching staff is unreal. And Brock is right. We need to enjoy it while we have it. Cause God, Minter was already interviewing for the Eagles last year. I can't imagine what opportunities are going to come his way this offseason. He deserves it. And for all the haters that made fun of him for coming from Vanderbilt, right?
Yeah, so much for that, right?
Yeah. So at this point, is there – we'll go around real quick and then kind of wrap it up. But with how good and efficient the offense has been, with how good the defense has been, is there anything else Michigan needs to do for you, Josh, other than obviously win Penn State, beat Ohio State? We've talked about that. Right. But in terms of on the field, is there anything else they need to do for you that you'd like to see before those big games come up to really bring your confidence level to the highest point?
If there is something, I'd be hard pressed to find it right now. Michigan is playing at an extremely high level. Even at this point with the way they're playing, it's and I want to use a Harbaughism here. It's getting greedy to ask for anything more than what they're doing because, really at this point, I'm nitpicking by saying, hey, maybe you can limit the big play. It's football. Teams are going to have an explosive play or two against you. That's just what happens. That's kind of the, just as that teams will score on you too. The fact that they've only given up 10 points as their highest amount through 6 games is really impressive. On the offensive side too, see Donovan become more involved and break off maybe a couple of bigger runs, more explosives. But man, I think what Derek says here in the comments, I think that's a really good one. Settle on a punt returner.
That's a good one.
I think that's a good one. I think that's probably one of their big, concerns. And I put that in
we really haven't talked about the special teams a lot, but this obviously, we knew there'd be a drop off with the guys that left.
Right.
But yeah.
As far as I see it, the guy that he's replacing wasn't necessarily returning kicks back for touchdowns every time he got the ball. They haven't given up they haven't turned the ball over, kicking on the punt return or kick return game. Maybe they could play the ball a little better, but I think what they're doing now, they're catching the ball, they're reliable. I think at this point with 2 young guys back there, that's probably what you can really ask for. Maybe there might be a chance to, maybe get some yardage, but they've been facing some really goofy punters lately. Like just real goofy,
weird kicks,
weird goofy punters. The spread punting game is, I don't understand it. I don't know what's the point. You line up on one side, and then all of a sudden they come back to the middle and they punt it. You're doing the same thing. You're punting the ball. Like I don't understand what the spread punt does, other than maybe kind of confuse you. But they have faced some goofy punters with the weird kicks and all that kind of stuff. Another comment here by Mark. refocus on the drops, which reappeared. Yeah, that's probably, and you're probably getting into nitpick territory with that too, because Cornelius made up for that drop that he had with a really impressive catch. Yeah, you could probably make the argument that Donovan's was the one that he needed to have too, but again, that's stuff that they'll see in tape. But yeah, I mean that's kind of where we're at with Michigan, though, is that all the stuff that you want to see fixed or improved upon is really nitpicky stuff, kind of really tightening up the bow on this program. And for the fans out there, I guess that's, you got to enjoy this, because not many programs out there can say the same things that we're saying right now in terms of fixing stuff. You look at USC last night, just a disaster. It's good. It's good to be Michigan right now in a lot of ways.
That's why I say, if you don't want to call them the best team in the country yet, that's fine. But who would you trade places with?
Right. True.
I feel like someone made a good point about Tommy Dolman having good hang time on his punts, number one in college football, which I think is interesting. But for me, I thought we were nitpicking.
Yeah.
For me, it feels like every season, even the last 2 years, as great as the last 2 years have been, it seems like every season through the first half, there's something that can be improved upon as, the final games of the season and Penn State and Ohio State come up. But this year just doesn't seem like there's anything that really jumps off the page or is really glaring as like a real spot that Michigan needs to tune up or focus on going into the final stretch of the regular season. It's like they're a well-oiled machine, and there's nothing that really needs fixed. There's nothing I really need to see more from them to feel confident going into the two big games toward the end of the year. I would say, like Josh mentioned, get Donovan Edwards going a little bit. That's probably the one thing I talked about last week, how that's a growing concern. But if Michigan's going to keep winning as big as they are without him really being much of a big factor, then so be it, right? If Michigan doesn't need him, then they don't need him. But if he gets going, then I feel like Michigan's offense will be even more dominant, which is hard to imagine. But get him going a little bit. I would like to see Colston Loveland get a little more involved. We saw him get his first touchdown reception yesterday, which was good to see. But there was a lot of hype about him coming into the season, and he's been good, but I feel like Michigan fans may have been expecting a little bit more from him. So that on the offensive side, I can't think of anything on defense really that I'm looking for more. I mean, it's just a well-oiled machine, and like Josh said, we're really nitpicking, and I think that goes to show how great of a place the program is in.
Just for fun, again, statistically, Colston Loveland does have 16 receptions, tied with Donovan Edwards for third, 2 behind Cornelius Johnson, and only 6 behind Roman. But again, his first touchdown, I'm with you. That was surprising. I thought he was going to be a deep threat, a red zone threat, and he still could be. And that's kind of where I'm at. I know what Loveland is. We've seen a little bit more of Barner. I know what he is. Donovan Edwards is, I'm not going to say arguably, he's wide receiver 3 at this point in the season. I want to see more of, whether it's Darius Clemens, Tyler Morris, or even Samaj Morgan at this point, who's made some plays. I want to see one of those guys start to be a bigger factor in the passing game, which might be tough with JJ only throwing 20 passes a game. But I do think when you start playing some of the better secondaries, like what Penn State has, if they are able to not take Roman out of the game per se, but seriously impact him, do you have another guy that can come out and be explosive for you? And I'd like to see one of those guys be that potentially. So, but other than that, again, I think we are nitpicking, right? And it's a good thing to be able to nitpick. And Roman put on the number 1 and put a lot of pressure on himself, and he's lived up to it. So that's a great shout out from Rob. So we are halfway through the season, folks.
God, yeah, isn't that crazy?
It's unbelievable. I mean, college football goes so quickly.
Yeah, it goes fast.
Anyway, so real quick, Brock.
All right, I'm watching that. Maybe not tonight. This week, I'll have a quick review next week.
It took Brock Heilig 10 minutes to back out of his commitment to watch Tommy Boy tonight. Not saying this is going to cost you your job, but again, just kind of going on the review sheet, some of the things here. So, no, awesome. All right, guys. Another great show. It's really easy to talk about Michigan when they are playing as well as they are playing, but we obviously, appreciate you guys joining us here on Hail to the Podcast. If you've been with us live, commenting and going back and forth and then throwing in your questions. Again, we try to go to live every Sunday at 6 p.m., but make sure you're liking, subscribing, and getting the notification bell so you do know when we go live with not only this show, but myself and Mr. Toski with cut-ups, and then Dennis every week with Michigan Football Live, 1 p.m. Monday through Friday. And then, of course, the same pitch I give you all the time, everything we've been talking about on this show, you can find over at the Maize and Blue Review, michigan.rivals.com. A lot of the conversation and comments that's happening here is happening inside the den. We truly believe we have the best message board community among the Michigan community. So we'd really appreciate it if you went over to michigan.rivals.com/sign up and join us there, as well as these avenues you've been here. But last minute, can we give Max Bredesen some props on his great blocking? Yes, we can.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Bredesen and Barner have been unreal blocking tight ends, and Loveland has done enough, right? Like in his role, I know we've talked about Barner and Loveland kind of being interchangeable, but we saw a lot of 13 personnel Saturday, a lot of 3 tight end sets. So Michigan, Jim Harbaugh's back is what that means.
Yeah.
Right.
And that whole call against him was crap. That was a good block. That was not a hold. That was a good, clean block.
Yeah.
So
that hold, and now I'm thinking about Aiden Hutchinson.
Yeah, well, he was a beast today as well.
Yeah,
good.
Even when he gets held on every single play.
Yeah.
So.
Go Lions, baby. Go Lions.
All right, folks, we will see you next week. And, of course, your homework assignment between now and then, if you're a weirdo and have not seen Tommy Boy, make sure you watch it. We will be discussing it next week on Hail to the Podcast.